Ladies and gentlemen, Christmas must be coming early this year because so far we've just been getting spoiled non-stop. Velma got us season 2, Has Been Hotel is getting us season 2, and now Megamind Rules is getting us season 2. All before we get GTA 6. Wild world that we live in, am I right? I honestly hope for this to be the final video I make on the whole recent onslaught of new Megamind content that's come out this year, because now it's just getting kind of boring for me to talk about this stuff, especially now that I've taken time and I've decided to look at these two things a lot closer and understand why they turned out the way that they did. So to give you a brief recap, Megamind is a 2010 animated movie from DreamWorks that wasn't very successful when it came out, but in recent times it has garnered a cult following and it's also gotten a critical re-evaluation, with many people considering it one of the best and most underrated DreamWorks movies. Earlier this year, we received both an official Megamind sequel and a Megamind TV series, both of which have gotten severely negative reviews for a multitude of reasons. Bad animation, different voice actors from the original movie, and plot holes that retcon the first movie. Yada yada yada, you get the point by now. I watched the Doom Syndicate movie and I made a video talking about it, and I think it is genuinely a fucking terrible movie and a disgrace to the original Megamind. But then I watched Megamind Rules, the TV series, and I thought it wasn't that terrible. A lot of the stuff that made the Doom Syndicate movie really bad was present in Megamind Rules, but it felt a lot more forgivable for Megamind Rules because it's a TV show. The cheaper animation quality and the lack of celebrity voice actors felt a lot more forgivable for Megamind Rules because it is a TV show. I finished watching Megamind Rules and I thought, it wasn't that bad, I guess. It's just extremely mediocre. It's better than the Doom Syndicate movie, at least, I'll give it that. Yeah, it's inferior to the first Megamind, but like, be honest with me, when has there ever been a cartoon based on an animated movie that's just as good as the animated movie that it's based on? When has there ever been a cartoon based on an animated movie that had the same high quality animation as the original animated movie, and it also retains the same celebrity voice actors that the original animated movie had? Exactly, that's what I thought. I will never not find it weird how people criticize Megamind Rules for not having Will Ferrell voicing Megamind or having cheaper animation quality or whatever, when like that's normal. That's kind of standard when it comes to cartoons based on animated movies. They almost never have the celebrity voice actors from the original animated movie, and they almost always have cheaper looking animation, so I don't see why it's a bad thing for Megamind Rules. My final verdict for Megamind Rules was that it was just an extremely mediocre show, and that's it. It's better than the Doom Syndicate movie, but it's obviously not as good as the original movie. If this aired on Nickelodeon in like 2012, I don't think anyone would think much of it at all. Like, if you put this next to Back at the Barnyard or whatever, it would like not stand out at all. It would fit in perfectly, and that's just kind of the way I looked at it. So I brought up in the original video that I made for Megamind Rules that the show ended with a cliffhanger for a season 2 that I initially thought was not going to happen at all. As it turns out though, Megamind Rules is indeed getting a season 2. In only a couple of days at that. June 20th, we're getting more episodes of Megamind Rules. And for those who are hoping that I make a follow-up video talking about season 2 of Megamind Rules, well, I have bad news for you. If I didn't make a proper video talking about Velma season 2, what makes you think I'm going to make a proper video talking about Megamind Rules season 2? Especially since at this point it's getting kind of boring and tiring talking talking about how bad the new Megamind stuff is. Like, yeah, okay, the Doom Syndicate movie is bad. We get it. I brought up in my review for Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate that I thought this movie was just gonna become forgotten about. Everyone was gonna hate on it when it first came out, and then eventually we would just forget about it and move on to something else to hate on. This wasn't gonna be like Food Fighter, the emoji movie, or whatever, where it would like live on in infamy or anything like that. No. This would just be a forgotten, failed attempt to bring back an old niche animated movie from the early 2010s. I was right on all of those aspects, except for the fact that this movie is very likely going to become a highly infamous thing within the animation community. A movie that animation YouTubers will not shut up about. They'll keep talking about how this movie is bad until the end of time. Until it gets to a point where it's just like, okay, fine, we get it, it's bad. Can we move on to something else, please? Yo, like no disrespect to Schaeferla's Productions or anything like that, but like the dehydration gun meme is like the unfunniest thing ever. I mean, to be fair, it's not his fault, you know, it is a legitimate flaw that's in the Doom Syndicate movie. I do regret not noticing it when I first watched the movie. I do regret not acknowledging that Megamind could have just shot the Doom Syndicate with the dehydration gun. Every single night, I regret not putting that into the review and subsequently taking all the credit for finding out about this. In an alternate timeline, it would have been me that started the dehydration gun meme, and I'm not sure how to feel about that. I just hate the fact that like any and all discussion for the first Megamind and like how it's a great movie, it's now gonna be like people are gonna bring up how bad Doom Syndicate is. They're gonna make the unfunny dehydration gun memes, and it's just like, can we just acknowledge how great the first Megamind is? Like, why do we gotta acknowledge how bad the sequel is? Who cares? I know people like to joke that like, oh, Megamind's a great movie, it's a shame that it never got a sequel and whatever, but like, you know, we could actually treat it like it never got a sequel. It just bothers me that like any and all discussion for this movie and how great it is, it's gonna be filled with people being like, well, I'm glad it never got a sequel, shoot them with the dehydration gun, am I right? And it's like, yeah, okay, these were funny jokes at first, but now it's like, okay, it's not funny anymore. If you repeat it a million times, it's not funny. Isn't it crazy how humor works like that? You make a joke one time and it's funny, you repeat it a million times, all of a sudden it's not funny. Isn't it crazy how things work like that?
One time is funny, two times is annoying, no?
And at the end of the day, it's like, it's crazy how people will like make this much of a big deal over a niche animated movie getting a bad direct-to-video sequel. Like, I love the first Megamind. At some point, I want to make a video talking about what made it so great as to just kind of end this whole arc. I don't know. But I'm surprised at the fact that people are still making a big deal about how this movie is bad months after it came out. I would have thought that like the film would come out, it get negative reviews, and then that's it. It would just be the flavor of the month, you know, the cool thing for the animation community to hate on, and then they would move on to something else to hate, but I guess not. Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate is in like this weird in-between gray area where it's like, it's genuinely a terrible movie, but it's also kind of overhated at the same time. When I say overhated, I don't mean like, oh, it's not as bad as everyone makes it out to be, y'all are just overreacting, because it is genuinely a terrible movie. But I mean like, it's overhated more in the sense that like, people are making it out to be a bigger thing than it actually is. A niche animated movie from the early 2010s gets a really bad direct-to-video sequel over 10 years later. Yeah, that sucks, but like, you know, shit happens. Some of you were born in a post-direct-to-video Disney sequel world, and it shows. For the younglings watching this video that weren't alive to witness this time in human history, allow me to educate you all. Once upon a time, long before the live-action remakes, Disney desecrated their animated classics in a completely different way. Between 1994 to 2008, Disney would put out a lot, and I mean a lot, of cheap, low-budget, direct-to-video sequels to a lot of their beloved classics. And on rare occasions, you had gems. Some of these movies very rarely turned out good, but more often than not, you just got complete crap. Now, a lot of people who lived through the direct-to-video Disney sequel era will acknowledge that these movies are bad, but that's it. They just acknowledge that they're bad and then they move on. They don't make a huge deal about how it's bad like they're doing with Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate. When you really think about it, Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate isn't really all that different from these movies. And I cannot believe this needs to be said, but again, this is going back to what I'm saying when I say that the movie is kind of overhated in a way. People treat this movie like it's going to affect DreamWorks in any way. It's going to affect the quality of their movies going forward. It's going to affect their reputation, etc. And it's like, no the f*** it's not. Calm down. Relax. This movie isn't gonna do anything to DreamWorks. They're gonna be fine. DreamWorks is not going to start making more movies like Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate. That's not gonna happen at all. I gotta be honest with you, I hate the fact that these two movies alone have just completely changed the way that people look at DreamWorks for the complete opposite reasons. Puss in Boots 2 turned out great, so now everyone assumes that all subsequent DreamWorks movies will be like Puss in Boots 2. Megamind 2 turned out terrible, so now everyone assumes that all subsequent DreamWorks movies will turn out terrible. That's not how it works. Listen, I love Puss in Boots The Last Wish, but like I look at it more and it's like this is definitely gonna be one of those movies where it's like it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. It's a great movie, there's no denying that at all, but it's also severely warped the way that people look at DreamWorks. And so now people think that all subsequent DreamWorks movies will be a masterpiece like Puss in Boots 2. And then Megamind 2 comes out and now people assume all subsequent DreamWorks movies will be garbage. It doesn't work like that. DreamWorks themselves didn't even make this damn movie. It was their television subsidiary, which is the reason why it has cheaper animation, and it's also the reason why Will Ferrell and David Cross and any of the celebrity voice actors from the original movie aren't back in this movie. This wasn't a main priority for DreamWorks. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. DreamWorks' main animation studio is busy cooking up all of these other animated movies, and then they see that this old movie of theirs is getting more attention, and so they get their television subsidiary to make a cheap, quick movie just to satisfy them. That obviously doesn't excuse the retcons or plot holes that the movie has, but like, you know, it makes a lot of the other aspects more understandable. This movie is not going to affect DreamWorks at all. This movie shouldn't even be talked about. Like, no one acknowledges any of the direct-to-video Disney sequels as being like mainline Disney canon movies, so why should this be considered part of the DreamWorks canon? It makes no sense to me at all. And as bad as some of these direct-to-video Disney sequels turned out, none of them, not a single one, did any significant damage to Disney at all. It didn't affect their reputation, it didn't affect how they were doing as a company, it didn't do anything to them at all. It's not like Disney was gonna go out of business and close their doors because, oh no, Beauty and the Beast 3 turned out bad, the world's gonna end now. So why do people act like this for Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate? It makes no sense at all. By no means am I defending this movie. I think it is a really bad movie, but like, it's kind of overhated as well, in the sense that like people are treating it like it's this big thing when it's just a cheap direct-to-video sequel, except that it's on a streaming service. But like, that doesn't really say much. That's not really much of a difference now, is it? I agree that Megamind should have gotten a proper sequel, but like, it's a niche DreamWorks movie from the early 2010s. It has a dedicated cult following, but it's not like a huge DreamWorks staple or anything like that. Even with the critical re-evaluation it has now, it's still extremely niche when compared to like Shrek or Kung Fu Panda. The fact that it got a cheap, low-budget sequel is disappointing, but it really shouldn't be that surprising, honestly. If the first Megamind was more successful when it came out, for sure it probably would have gotten a better, like, high-quality sequel. But when you really think about it, it would make no sense for DreamWorks to make a proper high-budget sequel to a niche movie they put out over 10 years ago. The fact that Megamind gets this cheap direct-to-video thing as a sequel is disappointing, but it's not really that surprising. I know I've spent most of this video talking about Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate and not Megamind Rules, but a lot of this could also apply to Megamind Rules as well. It's just kind of weird to me that, like, people will criticize Megamind Rules for having cheaper animation and for not having the celebrity voice actors that the original movie had. Like, that's normal. That happens all the time. Remember back in the early 2010s when Nickelodeon had all of those, like, DreamWorks cartoons? Penguins of Madagascar is obviously the one that we all remember, but there was also a Kung Fu Panda cartoon and a Monsters vs. Aliens cartoon. And then beyond these three shows, you also had a ton of other DreamWorks cartoons. Like, there was a How to Train Your Dragon cartoon in the early 2010s on Cartoon Network. You had both a Puss in Boots cartoon and a King Julian cartoon on Netflix, that sort of thing. And guess what? All of these shows have cheaper looking animation when compared to their original movies. The Monsters vs. Aliens cartoon in particular, I decided to look at it a little bit and it's like, holy shit, this show looks awful. This looks even worse than Megamind Rules if I were to be honest. I also checked out that Puss in Boots cartoon for a little bit, and although it doesn't look as bad, something about the fur texture of Puss himself just looks really off. Some of these shows didn't look that bad, to be honest. Like the Kung Fu Panda one I think looks good actually, but it's not about whether it looks good or bad. It's about if it looks inferior to the original movie or not, which in the case of Kung Fu Panda, it does. In the case of all of these shows, they look inferior. All of these shows have inferior looking animation to their original animated movie, because get this, the budget for a cartoon is significantly lower than the budget for an animated movie. Crazy, I know. A lot of these shows also don't have the celebrity voice actors that the original movies had. Like in that Kung Fu Panda cartoon, for example, they don't have Jack Black in it. He doesn't voice Po. They get someone else that sounds like Jack Black instead. I think Seth Rogen was in the original Monsters vs. Aliens, but I'm not sure. I haven't watched it in forever. But regardless, he's not in the cartoon. He doesn't reprise the role of whatever character he played in the movie for the cartoon. So it doesn't really make sense to me why people complain that like Will Ferrell doesn't voice Megamind in this show, David Cross doesn't voice Minion. Like, this is normal. It would cost too much money to get the celebrity voice actors back, so they instead get people that sound like the celebrity voice actors. Granted, whoever voices Megamind in these two things sounds nothing like Will Ferrell, but whatever, who cares? It's not like either of these would have been any better if they had Will Ferrell voicing Megamind or if they had higher quality animation. There's also the fact that this is coming out so soon after Season 1. Season 1 was in early March. This is coming out June 20th. There's this recent technique, I guess. I don't know if it's considered a technique. I don't know what to classify it as. And I don't even know if it's a recent thing either. But it's a thing that's happened where it's like a studio orders a certain batch of episodes to be made. And then they like split the episodes up into two halves. And then they market the first half as Season 1. And then the second half is Season 2. Like, I think this happened with that Cuphead cartoon on Netflix. I don't know if there's any other examples, but it happened with that. What most likely happened is DreamWorks Television Animation ordered a batch of episodes for Megamind Rules, and then they decided to split the batch into two halves. The first half is Season 1, and the second half is Season 2. This also makes it very unlikely that the show will get a Season 3, so like, you know, you can relax now. This is probably the last we'll get of Megamind Rules. I also, honest to God, don't want want to see anyone pull the whole hate-watching bullcrap that y'all pull with Velma on this, because compared to Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate, not a lot of people really talk about Megamind rules. It's not as hated as the Doom Syndicate movie. I'm probably one of the only people to make a proper video on Megamind rules, if I were to be honest. Even though the Doom Syndicate movie is largely infamous and hated, basically nobody knows about Megamind rules, so I better not see anyone say like, oh, it got a season 2 because of people hate watching it. I don't buy that shit when people say it for Velma, and I'm definitely not going to buy it when people say it for Megamind rules. There is no proven correlation between a bad show getting hate watched and it getting a season 2 because of people hate watching it. There would be a huge ocean of garbage TV shows still going on to this day if this whole hate watching a bad show gave it a season 2 nonsense was true. To wrap things up, no, I'm not going to make a video reviewing Megamind Rules Season 2. Number 1, I find it boring to talk about the stuff with Megamind now, and like, oh, the new stuff is bad and whatever, it's just boring to me now. Number 2, much like with Velma Season 2, it's very likely that Megamind Rules Season 2 will just be the same thing as season 1. Everything that I've said about the show in its first season, it'll likely apply to season 2 as well. There wouldn't be anything new or unique to say about season 2. So I don't see any reason in just rehashing the same thing again. Number 3, as also brought up in the Velma Season 2 video, I would rather look at new, different cartoons that I've yet to look at on the search for the worst cartoon, rather than retread old ground that I've already covered for its next season, for a season 2, whatever. There are now officially 5 cartoons on this series that are still ongoing to this day. None of these shows I ever plan to make a follow-up video for, talking about whatever their newest season is. Like when Has-Been Hotel Season 2 comes out, I'm not gonna make a video on it. You could say that I'm a hypocrite for this because I remade the Our Cartoon President episode a couple days ago, and I do have another cartoon that I plan to revisit on this series, but those are different. There's a difference between watching a show that you've already covered for its second season, only for that second season to just be full of the same things you criticized the show for in its first season, versus rewatching a show that you hadn't watched in a while and giving it a more of a proper chance and making an actual proper review of it. There's a huge difference. And finally, Megamind Rules isn't even that terrible. At worst, it's just extremely mediocre, and that's it. A lot of the negative qualities that Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate had is also in Megamind Rules, but it's a lot more forgivable because Megamind Rules is a TV show. And again, if this was a Nickelodeon show from like, I don't know, 2013, 2011, whatever, if this aired alongside TMNT 2012 or whatever, no one would care about it at all. I just don't see any reason to make a follow-up video covering season 2 of this thing when it comes out. It just seems like a complete waste of time, especially in the very likely event that season 2 ends up having the same problems that season 1 had, and so subsequently a video talking about season 2 would just be a rehash of the season 1 video. It's just a waste of time to me. I don't have the energy to do that. I would rather focus on things that are much more interesting to me. Again, I didn't make a video on Velma Season 2, so what makes you think I'm going to make a video on Megamind Rules Season 2? Just think about that, please. Think about that. Anyways, that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing, as it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I will see you all next time. Adios.